folks, it's Laura with Rain Tree Nursery, and today we are going to be planting some blueberries. We have this area right here in front of the house that used to have a greenhouse here. It was a great spot for a greenhouse because it was close to the house, easy to maintain. But our blueberries aren't doing as well as we'd like, and we've decided that we're going to try a system that will allow the blueberries to be happier, to get a little bit more water, to be placed closer to our hose bib, and still keep this area good looking, easy to maintain, and easy to water. This is kind of a fun project. It has a couple of steps, and we'll show you how we're going to do it. So here we have a pit. We dug this pit last fall, and this pit is where our blueberries are going to go. What we've done is we have filled the edges of the pit all around this center walking section full of rotten pieces of wood. This is rotten wood. You could use old firewood for this. If you have access to a nature preserve and you see old rotten solid but really close to falling apart pieces of wood, this is the kind of wood you want for a project like this. Blueberries want wood right in their shallow and fibrous root zones. And here in the Pacific Northwest, we have very dry summers. So although we have lots of rain in fall, winter, and spring, in the summer, when it's hot, the blueberries really suffer. So what we've done is we've collected pieces of rotten, punky wood, and we've allowed them to charge all winter long so they're nice and wet. We're going to go ahead and plant the blueberries along the edges of this big square. And the center, we're going to keep solid because that's going to be the walkway that we're going to use to be able to access all of these plants. So part one on a project like this is always working on suppressing the grass. The way we're going to do that is we're going to use our trusty battery-powered string trimmer, also known as a weed whacker, to cut the grass down absolutely as short as we can get it. In order to keep that grass from coming back, I'm going to lay down some burlap, coffee bean bags in our case, on top of what was a grassy spot. And then we're going to put a nice layer of wood chips on top of that. It's going to be easy to walk on. It's going to keep that grass suppressed. It's going to keep everything nice and clean, but it's going to allow good water flow through to the soil below. So the element that really makes this design shine is the rotten, punky wood that we're going to be burying directly under the root zone of the blueberries. This wood is soft, it's going to act like a natural sponge, and blueberries are naturally bog plants. They want damp roots, not standing water, mind you, but damp roots all summer long, actually all year long. We have a real wet winter cool season, but we have an extremely dry, although it's not very hot, summer season. So by burying solid pieces of soft and punky wood, they will act like a sponge. The blueberry roots, which are relatively shallow but fibrous, will go right on top of these. They'll be able to sink into the sponge of the wood. We'll be able to water maybe twice a week instead of every day and have this water hold the roots, keep them moist, and that's going to make the blueberries happy and productive. Now, I wouldn't use wood chips in a situation like this because wood chips have a whole lot of surface area. This doesn't have very much surface area, but the same amount of chips, oh my gosh, tons of surface area, and it would want to decompose, whereas this is already decomposed. Those wood chips, in their decomposition process, would lock up a lot of nitrogen, which would keep the blueberries from being able to grow healthy leaves. So we don't want to use wood chips anywhere except on the top of the soil to suppress weeds and to hold moisture in on the top. Underneath the soil, we want to use these solid chunks of punky wood. One of the things I always think about when I'm clearing a space, when I'm weeding, is what do I need to do with the plants that I'm taking out? And in this particular circumstance, this used to be a gravel driveway adjacent to the house. We had the greenhouse on it for some period of time. It helped enrich the soil, but this is still very, very poor soil. And instead of composting these weeds, there's nothing terribly awful in this weed mix. There's no morning glory. There's no really pernicious weeds. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the weeds back in the soil. They're going to degrade once they're covered, and they're going to do nothing but continue to enrich things. Something else I think about when I'm weeding a bed is there something else in here that can be useful? One element of this system that we are saving is a strawberry border at the beginning of this bed. And for those of you who know anything about strawberries, you know that they make babies. And so while I'm working in this bed, I'm also making sure that if I find any strawberry plants, that I capture those and I continue to use them in the system. Nature gives us all kinds of free plants all the time if we're careful enough to look for them. And here I'm looking in the little bit of topsoil that's on top of this really horrible gravel, and here we go. Here's a strawberry right there. So I put my weeds in the back and I gently harvest this strawberry. Awesome, look. Oh, that's a nice one too. Make sure I'm not transplanting any weeds with it. And I can just go ahead and put it right over here in this already prepared bed. And I've got one more plant. Burlap is one of my favorite materials to use in the garden. I would much rather use burlap than a weed barrier, rime, or what do they call that? Horticulture cloth, any day. This is durable, it's natural. If you have coffee roasters nearby, you can get bags. If you don't have access to burlap, you can certainly use cardboard. Several layers of cardboard will do the same thing. It'll be a little slick though, which is why burlap is awesome. What I'm going to do is simply lay the burlap down on top of the grass. I'm going to do 2 layers of burlap. We'll be able to tuck one end under the edge of the facing of the bottom of the mobile. We'll be able to tuck the other end on this edge here too. So you want good coverage on each end. That will smother the grass, but you're not using any noxious chemicals. It will compost the grass and it will increase the value of the soil. I mean, how much better does that get? So in laying down the burlap, it's pretty simple. You do want to watch your edges, however. I'm going to tuck this edge under here so that the metal siding can come down and over that and hold it in place. And then I want to make sure that when I lay down my next bag, I'm overlapping generously. Then I do this again, and that's how you proceed. While we're working on this project, we're also thinking about how we're going to be able to maintain it over the long term. And one of the best ways to maintain beds that are adjacent to grass is to use some sort of barrier. Grass is a rhizome creeper, and it will infiltrate into this nice, wet, moist, rich bed if we let it. We don't want to let it. So one of the best ways that I know of to create a barrier is to use old wood. This is some old barn wood that we just happened upon. I'm always collecting stuff like this just for projects like this. On this area right here, we want that barrier to be just at grass level. We're going to backfill behind it and in front of it. The fruit plants are going to go right here. So now all we have to do is backfill these areas, go ahead and plant our blueberries, and then make sure that they don't have direct contact with the logs. We're going to put a little bit of soil and compost on top of them, but they're going to be very, very close. You know, when I'm working in a project like this, and I can use natural elements like wood, I always want to do it. I'd rather not use plastic in my gardens. I'd rather not have to go to the store and buy a big roll of bender board to install as a grass barrier. Maybe some people like to do that. I don't want to have to do that. I know eventually this wood will degrade and I'll have to replace it, but you know, it's a natural system. Things change, and I don't mind doing that because I'd rather not have those little microplastic bits released in my soil, especially not around my food plants. One of the best tools to be using in a garden that's already started and going is a narrow spade. This one's called a poacher's spade commonly. You see, it's much more narrow than your standard shovel or spade. It makes a lot less disturbance in different areas of the garden, especially when you have areas that are more heavily planted than what we're seeing here. Then using something like this, a poacher spade, gives you a really nice, elegant, tight cut, and you don't damage other plants in the process. Now I know we need to move this poor blueberry. It's not very full. I don't see any new canes coming from down below, so I know it's not happy in this space. I also know the space used to be a gravel driveway, and so I've worked on making the soil better, but it's still quite shallow. That's one of the reasons why we're creating this new blueberry bed just for our friends. I want to be able to move this plant and disturb as little of its root system as possible. So I'm taking my poacher spade. I'm going out past the drip line of the plant, and I'm going to start feeling around and watching the plant, because the plant will tell me when I've gotten under its roots. You see how the plant is lifting and the soil is splitting? That indicates I'm getting under the roots. I'm in the right direction. So I'm very gently going to start working around the edge of the plant, because blueberries are also pretty shallow. I don't have to worry about going too deep, but I do want to make sure that I get as much of the original root system as I can get. Whoa, that's a nice deep pocket. I'm going to lift and allow the roots to separate from the soil. Oh, that's a nice split. Instead of just cut, I'm going to allow the roots to show me where I need to go. All right. Okay. And there we have it. It's pretty obvious where the roots of this plant are. I can take out this support. It's okay to grab your plant by the stem as long as you're down low and by the roots. And look at that, pull it right out of the ground. That's not a huge root mass, but it's obviously very tight. So I know I've gotten everything I need to get. I'm going to sort out any weeds that are in here. Oh, I can see there's one little one coming up down below right there. So that looks like it's actively growing. We're going to put it right over here. Since it's tall, and it's going to be tall, this is a 6 to 8 foot tall plant, we're going to put it in the back of our system. I would look at this plant and see what direction it wants to face. Most of the buds are facing in this direction, so since the sun comes from the south, this is a good placement. And it's a little high right now, so I'm going to go ahead and pull just a bit of this back so I can seat this plant in a real comfortable way. And that's good, so it can be happy and thrive. There we go. That's how to do it. Now we're at the point where we can start putting the wood chips down on top of the burlap, or cardboard if you don't have burlap, in order to make an access path. I've learned over years of experience, you want to make your access paths as wide as possible because your plants will come in, it'll make things uncomfortable. Having a nice wide access path is also great when you're creating your design so that you can move things in easily. I always try to start from the middle and dump, but you do have to watch your wheelbarrow so that it doesn't pull up your burlap. And then all you do is just spread it out. The goal here is to cover the edges of the burlap so everything stays put. Also to keep your soil cool and moist on both sides of your barriers, and to provide a nice clean edge against the siding of the house. And now the design is done. We were able to get everything finished. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I think the plants are going to be very, very happy too. Let's take a look at all the pieces. So what we did was we went ahead and we planted these blueberry plants from other parts of the yard in these nice rows over where we put the rotted wood. Then we backfilled on top of the rotted wood. We put nice solid soil that has some good acidity to it. If you were going to amend your soil and add raw ground coffee beans, for example, to increase the acidity, that would be where you'd do it. Then we put the blueberries on the top, and then we had some nice shreddy fresh wood chips to put on the top of that. The wood chips make a cap over the soil. The soil will stay moist and damp. The wood chips will hold that moisture in, and we know blueberries love their moisture. I also had another shape of wood chip. I had some arborist chips that we ran across, and so I was able to use these nice big bulky square chips on the pathway so that you have a really clear distinction between where it's okay to walk and where your actual beds are. Of course, edging the beds, I love to use old cordwood or old firewood, stuff that's too rotten to burn. Makes a really nice edge, has a nice rustic look to it. I'm really happy with how it all turned out. And here we are 6 weeks later. Seeing the health of this plant, seeing how it's recovered, has made all of the hard work totally worthwhile. You can see it's got really good berry set. It's got lots of new growth at the top of the plant, beautiful new stems. But what I am most proud of, look at all of this new growth from below. That is amazing. And this plant withstood the horrible heat wave of 2021. This plant withstood temperatures of 111 degrees. And look at how great it looks. So it might have been a little bit of work, and it was totally worthwhile. Thanks for joining us. I'm Laura with Rain Tree Nursery, and we'll see you next time.